The success of your podcast is tied to your network. In fact, the success of your entire career is tied to your network. That being said, it's such an important piece of just the whole equation, whether you're just a solo podcaster or if you're a business owner or if you're a marketer, whatever it is, that network is a key piece to your success. So that is what we're going to talk about this week in one of these rare solo episodes. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Before we dive in, I've got one quick request. If you're listening to this on one of the audio platforms, do us a favor. Leave us a review. It's going to help us reach other people. It's going to make sure that we are building the community. The stronger this community is, the more help it is going to be for you. So a review would be hugely helpful. And also, if you're watching the video or any place else, you see one of the clips, leave us a comment. What would you like to see? We're always looking to bring value. And with that, we want to make sure that we're doing the things that you want to hear about. And that way I know what guests to seek out. Who am I looking for? What topics do we need to cover? So let us know, whether it be a comment or a review, whatever. That being said, we all know that our success is tied to our network. And this, I mean, whether you're a business owner, whether you're a marketing person, whether you're just, a regular employee in another business, your network is huge, huge, huge in terms of your success. So how have we used the podcast as a networking tool? And there's a couple of things that we have with this. So the first thing that I want to talk about, we use it to reach out to new people all the time. There's two pieces to that, I guess I would say, is the first piece to that is when we can say, look, we have a podcast, I would love to have you on. Or we have a podcast that, hey, we had a guest on that had some really good information about that. I see questions and stuff on whether it be like Threads or X or LinkedIn, or when you see these conversations happening, to be able to refer to the podcast, that allows me to get into someone's network. And I don't like to say to get into someone's network, but the big thing is I always hate it when someone just shows up. And they expect something. To me, it allows me to add value. And that's what lets me in someone's network. I'm big on whenever we have these conversations, whenever we do the podcast, I want to make sure that we are adding value. If we're not adding value to someone's day, they're not going to be here. They're not going to listen. They're going to tune out. The same thing's true with networking. If you aren't adding value, then someone's going to tune you out. So for me, it allows me to answer other people's questions by saying, hey, look, we talked about that in this podcast or that podcast. It provides an amazing way to segue and to get those new introductions. The second piece that I kind of want to mention with this is it's expanded our reach in terms of how we reach people. There's a lot of people that know that we have the podcast and this is what we do and this is who we talk to that I've never personally met. They'll come up to me and say, hey, I love the podcast. I've learned so much from it. When I hear those, I realize that I'm reaching people that I don't necessarily know. So they're, in a sense, already in my network, even though I haven't directly talked to them. They've felt, and once again, that I have added that value to them for their day, for that chunk of time that they have given me. I have added that value. And once again, it's allowed me to just expand out of that circle, out of that immediate circle, and it's that increased visibility. The other part about that is, and this is kind of twofold, the last piece that I'll talk about this will strengthen connections. And the first piece kind of going to tail on to the last thing that I talked about. Stay with me here for a second. When people have seen you on video, when they've heard your voice all the time, that connection's there. They know you. They've been around you. So many people have heard me tell the story of when I used to work at the semi-truck dealership. I just had someone walk in my office. Hey, Josh, love the videos. And he just sat down. He thought he was my best friend because he had watched so many of the videos that I have done. He knew me. He knew how I was going to, my mannerisms. He knew how I was going to speak. He automatically had that connection with me. So that's a big piece on expanding that reach. There's a flip side to that too, and this is one that I don't think a lot of people have thought about. I've had a lot of guests on here that people that I'm close to, Rob Wentz, Bill Snow, Lindsay Sims McKee are some of the last guests that I had on. And what's been interesting with them is I walked out of the studio knowing them a lot better than I did walking into the studio. And these are people that I feel close to. These are my friends. And suddenly I felt like I had so much deeper of a connection with them. It's been such a relationship builder. It's strengthened that connection. And it's really made a difference in a couple of ways with how I'm able to collaborate with them. Now that I know more things about them, I'm able to work with them better. And this goes back to, we always talk about the intent with the questions that you're asking is don't ask these surface level questions. Do your research. Ask good questions up front, then ask the deeper questions in the podcast. The answers that I got from these people were super educational, super helpful, and I learned so much about them. To me, that was it just really locked everything in, and I not only did I thoroughly enjoy all those interviews, but in the same sense, it brought me so much closer to those people that I was already really close with. And that connection, that relationship to me feels so much more solid. And it's just been a great, great, great thing for me, because how often do we really sit down and ask those deep questions, those intentioned questions? We don't. A podcast is a great, great, great way to do that. Moving on from kind of like the initial connection piece, what are some of the things that you need to do to make sure that those connections are solid? The first one is from the podcasting studio standpoint, and let's talk about this from an in-person standpoint either. You need to be consistent. You need to show up. If you show up here, there, or wherever, you haven't really built that connection. If you're there week after week, time after time, event after event, and let's consider a podcast an event. People come to know and trust that. You're there for them. You show up consistently for them. We all know those people that kind of flutter in and out of life, and they're great. They're wonderful. I'm thankful to have many great people like that in my life. But in the same sense, it's the people that show up week after week that I really feel that connection with. Those are the ones that I really trust. Those are the ones that I really know. And it's because they show up consistently week after week, day after day, month after month, year after year, however long that timeline is. Consistency, and a little bit more consistency. The other thing that is a huge key in this is networking is an exercise in learning. I know so many people that are just so anxious, so excited to tell you about what they do that they forget to figure out what you do. To me, I always have a couple of questions that I like to ask that really dive deep. Everyone's got the base networking question. So tell me what you do. You're gonna figure out what the person does, and that's fine. But what happens if you came up to someone, let's say it's at a networking event, and said, "Tell me the project you're excited about right now." You're gonna figure out what the people do. You're gonna find out what excites them in their business, and they're gonna lead you on a really different, interesting path. You're going to build that connection because you're not just going to get that prepped 30-second elevator pitch like so many other people are. To me, it's the same thing in the podcast studio. You now have the chance to ask those deeper questions. Like I alluded to earlier, saying I've got this better connection with these people. It's because I've taken the time and I've asked those better questions about it. When you do that, that's going to help build that network. That's going to build that trust. I've got 2 or 3 guests lined up that I've asked questions of recently. And every single one of them has said like, oh, I'm excited for this. I'm excited to answer the questions that you're going to ask, because they know that I'm going to be asking these deeper questions. And then it's going to build that relationship. To me, that is such a huge piece and just a building block of things that go on. The other thing is once you ask the question, you're only going to build a genuine connection if you listen. And listen with intent. Listen not to answer, but listen to ask the next question. What can I learn from this? What can I use in this to move forward? What can I do to help this person? Those are how you build those genuine connections. The same thing is true in the podcast. That's why I often ask for the comments. I want to know what you guys want to hear. I want to be adding that value. I want to build that genuine connection with my audience. That's you. I want to be helping you. I want to be helping you move your business, your marketing, your podcasting. I want to help you move all of those things forward. That's what I'm looking for in asking those questions. It's that genuine connection. I want to help. I'm concerned. Let's do this. And the way that you show that is by asking those right questions. Now, there's a couple of misconceptions that people have with this. And the big thing is it's with networking and podcasting. There's this instant growth. I'm going to do a podcast. And I get people all the time that say they're going to do the podcast and they think about, I'm going to monetize it. And you're like, you're going to get $5 next year, maybe if you're lucky. The same thing's true with your network. If you show up once and think, I'm going to get to know all these people. There's a room of 100 people. I'm going to get to know 100, but no, you're not. You're better off spending the time getting to know 3 people in that room really, really well, because those 3 people in that room can help you know those 100 people. The same thing goes true for your podcast. Focus on exactly who you want to be talking to, because if you're trying to talk to 100 people in a room, guess what? You're not going to be building those connections. So that's where this instant growth myth comes in. You have to build a connection to grow your network or your podcast. If you don't do that, you're going to be washing around here really kind of talking to no one. And that's exactly what we don't want to be doing. With this, the other thing that I want to say is that there's a few actionable tips in this. And the first one is be intentional. If you just show up and talk without figuring out what you're going to talk about and what direction you're headed, or, I see so many podcasts where they sit across the table from someone and so tell me what you do. Yikes. There's no intent with that. There's no effort with that. And therefore, there is absolutely no connection with that. I have gone on a number of podcasts like that, and I've become a guest. We'll have an example that I'll put in here for you in a second. I've become a guest. This is just one short clip from that you'll get to see how that goes.
I love it. I love it. Well, Josh, give us kind of like a little story of kind of how you got into this production side of the world. You know, it's definitely a new age vertical that there is for us to, to hop into, but kind of tell us how you got into it. Because I'm sure there was some corporate life before this or something that you were doing before that got you to be like, screw this. I'm jumping. I'm burning the ship. You know what I mean?
I lit it on fire and walked away and swam away. So for me, I spent years in the automotive realm, went into agriculture for a while.
That's awesome. That's awesome. But no, man, Josh, I appreciate you sitting down and talking with us, taking time out of your day, sit down and join us, but, kind of walk us through the story, as you said, you started this business a little over 3 years ago. Walk us through the story of what it was like, getting into the business on your own, of leaving where you were, because I'm sure you had a comfortable job where you had a good salary that you were comfortable with and just left it for, something that you're starting up. I know it was scary, but really, what'd you do really well when you started?
You can see in that there's just no connection there. There's none. I'm doing my best to be charismatic and engaged and all the other stuff, but there's just no connection there. It's so tough. Because, I mean, they're like, so what do you do? That's the most basic piece of information. Look that up before you have someone onto your show. Whenever I'm at an in-person networking thing, there's the name right on the shirt here. If someone comes up and says, hey, what is Pedal Stopper Productions? That's a very different question than just, what do you do? Be intentional to make that connection. You have to be very intentional about it. The other thing that I want to say is bring value. And in watching some of that podcast, you can see there wasn't much value there. It's like, hey, what do you do? So what are some struggles, or what are some good stuff? It's all these base surface level questions that we've all heard answers to 10,000 times. You've all heard me say that if you speak to everyone, you're speaking to no one. If you're in a crowded room of 100 people and you just start talking, no one is going to pay attention to you. If you engage with one or two people in that room, suddenly that conversation has drastically changed. And now you're talking directly with those people. There's a huge difference in that. So with that, make sure that you are bringing value to these conversations. If someone's coming onto your podcast, the value should be they're an expert and they are going to give people information that watch your podcast. They're going to give information to the people that are going to watch your podcast. They're going to be educated. The value in them coming onto your podcast should be that you're going to ask them good questions. You're going to give them a platform to show that they're an expert. Now you've established a relationship by doing this. It's not just having someone in to sit and talk for a couple of minutes. You're asking good questions. You're letting them show off what they're an expert in. That, to me, is the big key in all this. That is how you bring value to them, is by allowing them a platform to show off their expertise. It's huge. All said and done, podcasting can be a game changer when it comes to building connections, when it comes to building community. And I mean, but it's like anything else. It takes time and it takes effort. There are no short roads to this. What we do want to do is we want to make sure that we aren't making the same mistakes that so many other people have made. There's no shortcuts, but there's a direct route. And let's make sure that we're taking that direct route. With that, we want to make sure that we're creating those authentic connections and we're nurturing those relationships, whether it's the relationship with your audience or the relationship with the person that you're talking with across the table. Nurture those. Think of the podcast as a tool for building community that can support and inspire your journey. This is a tool. It's not the be-all, end-all. It is a hammer does nothing. You have to use it. A wrench does nothing. You have to use it, and correctly. A wrench can be a hammer, but it's not a good one. So make sure you're using it correctly. To me, I would love to hear your experiences with your network and your podcast. How has it helped grow your network? How has it bring people in? How have you built a community with it? Let me know. I would love to hear that. We've got some great guests coming up over the next few days. I really appreciate you stopping by. That being said, take care of yourself, and if you can, take care of someone else too. I will see you soon.